With the news of Vice Media launching its own sports division, we got the announcement that Dark Side of the Ring will be returning in 2025, and we have a premiere date, Tuesday, March 25th. That's when Season 6 will premiere. This is part of Vice TV relaunching with a sports-first commitment, airing other shows like American Ninja Warrior and Arena Football, and new series like Dark Side of the Cage, which is assumed to be an MMA-focused series similar to Dark Side of the Ring. Per Greg Oliver at Slam Wrestling, while no topics have officially been announced, through the last few months, he says they've been collecting clues through various contacts and believe these to be some of the subjects. So again, these are not confirmed yet by Vice. There's been no schedule put out, but this could be what Season 6 is going to look like. There looks to be an episode on superstar Billy Graham, who, of course, had a very interesting life, a very interesting career. He passed away in May of last year. And, look, he's somebody who is an important figure in wrestling history, more, I think, than anything he ever did in the ring for the people he influenced. And you have people like Hulk Hogan and Jesse Ventura, who was out there with a feathered boa on Saturday Night's Main Event just last night, who copied this man. They were influenced by Billy Graham. They copied him. And obviously they became bigger, or at least Hogan did become bigger stars. But for that reason alone, he was a very influential figure in the business and a very tragic one because, all that success, and it was squandered by all of the steroid use and not even steroid use, steroid abuse. And his body just completely broke down on him. And I'm sure that'll be the big dark portion of the story. But man, he has had so many near-death experiences over the years. There's been so many stories of him he had like a liver transplant many years ago and needing this surgery and that surgery. And he always seemed to kick out until one day he just couldn't. So that'll be the story of superstar Billy Graham. Test is apparently going to get an episode devoted to him. He passed away in March of 2009 of a drug overdose. Test is somebody, when he first got pushed in WWE, he looked like he had superstar potential. I still look back fondly on that program and that SummerSlam match he had with Shane McMahon. And then he was just in like a prime position, man. He was going to marry the boss's daughter and storyline, and looked like maybe he would go on to feud with Triple H. And they just blew him off. And he never, from that point forward, and he spent many more years in the company, but he never attained that same level of stardom ever again. Eddie Gilbert, second-generation wrestler, says Eddie followed his father, Tommy Gilbert, into pro wrestling, as did his brother, Doug. An incredible mind for the wrestling business, but was somewhat undersized for the time period and used whatever means necessary to get bigger. He died of a heart attack in Puerto Rico in February of 1995. Two topics that I pitched after the end of Season 5 looks like they may be in the works on Daphne and Ludwig Borga. On Daphne, that's just a very sad story. You talk about tragic. I mean, look, you could argue Billy Graham and all the steroid abuse and everything. Yeah, I don't know if tragic is even the right word. I mean, he did it to himself. But Daphne, it's just a sad story. And in the very early days of the podcast, there was an episode. I want to say it was episode 155. 155 or 150. It might have been 157, but whichever one it was, I think that was the one where, I just went on about the kind of abuse in many ways of the female performers in TNA, and Daphne was kind of chief on that list, and the things she went through and getting concussed and injured, and it was awful, what she went through. And she fought through many demons, and she passed away in September of 2021. If I remember, I think she took her own life. But I said, Daphne is, unfortunately, the perfect subject for a show like Dark Side of the Ring. Because when I think of her, she was the Scream Queen in WCW, right? She goes all the way back to the WCW days. But I just remember Daphne, and she had that big smile. And to think that she went from that, which is what I picture in my head, to being somebody who obviously at the very end was not doing a whole lot of smiling. And for her life to end the way it did was tragic. So if there is an episode on her, I think it's appropriate. Ludwig Borga is for very different reasons. I think another good topic for a show like this. I don't recall him being terribly well liked. You don't hear too many positive Ludwig Borga stories like, oh yeah, that guy was a riot, man. He was so much fun to hang out with. He kind of came out of nowhere, but he didn't just wrestle. Like, he wrestled and he did strongman, and he may have done MMA or some kind of fighting. He served, I think, in the Finnish parliament, so he became a politician, and he passed away in 2010. So that may be an episode. Billy Jack Haynes is another one. He is currently in jail in Oregon for allegedly murdering his wife at the beginning of this year. And if I remember that story, first of all, Billy Jack, he's not all there. Okay, he's definitely a few French fries shy of a Happy Meal. But his wife also, I think his wife was very sick. And I don't recall exactly what the illness was, if it was dementia, Alzheimer's. It might have been dementia. And so there was talk about maybe this was like a mercy killing. Because you hear like, oh, you killed his wife. You think, oh, he flew into a rage and he killed his wife. As I recall, I don't have all the details of the story in front of me right now, but I think he was basically her caretaker. It sounded like he needed a caretaker of his own, but it may have been a case where she was very sick or she was suffering, and that's why he killed her. I don't know, but he's behind bars right now. I don't know, what his status is or where that case currently is, but he was a big star back in the day, like in the Pacific Northwest. I remember him from WWE when I was first, a fan. I was very young, but he wasn't like a major star in the company. He was a mid to upper mid card level guy. He never held a championship. He was never featured too prominently. My biggest memory of Billy Jack Haynes is probably the match with Hercules, where he got busted open with the chain at WrestleMania 3. Like, I don't have a lot of other Billy Jack Haynes memories, but he was definitely a bigger star in some of the other territories. And he was a very colorful person, because in the last 10 years, 15 years, go check out a Billy Jack Haynes shoot interview and some of the wild stories and the wild conspiracy theories. Like, he knew how to tell a story. Now, whether or not you could believe that story, that's a whole other thing, but he was definitely a storyteller. Vader, it looks like, maybe getting the dark side treatment. And, I don't know. I mean, you could point to stories, I guess, in his life, like the fight that got him fired from WCW, and maybe the latter part of his life. I don't know if there's anything terribly dark, but there's stories that you could tell about his career, about his push being killed, basically, by Shawn Michaels in WWE. I also think about that match he had in Japan. I forgot who it was. Oh, it was with Hansen. It was with Stan Hansen, where his eye popped out. He had to push it back in. Ugh. Yeah, he's had a very interesting career. This one reminds me, though, maybe more of like a John Tenta type episode, where there isn't anything overly dark, but he definitely lived an interesting life. So I'd want to watch that. And then the other one that is rumored is an episode on Hell in a Cell. Now, it looks like they try to have at least one episode like this every season, kind of more of a lighthearted episode. They did one on the Brawl for All. I don't know, like an episode on Hell in a Cell, like, what's it going to be about? How violent the match is? Like, I get them wanting to have some topics that are maybe not as dark, but I think you could do one on the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, the worst pay-per-view of all time back in 99. Like, why is that not an episode? Anyway, there's also talk of an episode devoted to Mick Foley, based on Jim Ross saying that he was interviewed for it earlier this year. So that doesn't mean that it's going to make the cut. I mean, there's been talk over the years of them filming stuff for a Mike Awesome episode, and his ex-wife apparently got that squashed. Not that it wasn't true, but that the episode would not be done because she didn't want it to be done. I don't know if they needed her cooperation for it or what, but so, I mean, there's been talk about episodes that were going to happen and then ended up not happening. But Mick Foley, I mean, I guess it would just focus on how broken down he's become from all the crazy bumps and all the abuse that he's taken over the years and that he's put himself through. which in that case, I guess that means in season 14, we'll get our Darby Allin episode. I'm looking forward to covering the new season. I cover every season, and I will cover this one as well, as I have the previous 5. At the end of last season, I talked about possible ideas because in wrestling, there really is no shortage of them. If this Slam report is true, that would seem to cover most, if not all of them. But, I mean, there's so many other topics. Like, you could do one on Scott Hall. Problem with that is that you're never going to get the people you need for it to sit down and be interviewed. Like, you can, right off the bat, you can eliminate anybody from WWE, like Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Kevin Nash is not going to do it. Waltman might. Maybe they could get his ex-wife Dana or his son Cody, but it just seems unlikely. They could do episodes on Rick Rude. You could do an episode on Ashley Massaro, which is another sad situation. Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff, the piece of shit that he is. You could do one on him. Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney. I mention him every year. See, I think some of the lesser known names could make for some of the best episodes, because you'd learn a lot coming out of it that you didn't know going into it. A lot of these other topics, like especially me, I've talked about a lot of these stories before. Like I would say 95% of the stuff that I hear about in these episodes, I already knew or I've talked about on the Sound Off. And then I get excited with the other 5%. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. But that's kind of rare. So I feel like you would learn more from someone like a Larry Sweeney, who a lot of people are not going to be familiar with. He was a wrestler and a manager on the independent scene who a lot of people were making comparisons to Bobby Heenan. And he was very young when he took his own life. It's a very sad story. I think he was bipolar. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't on his medication, whatever it was, but he had his demons and they got the better of him. And what a waste of talent. What a waste of life. I think he would have gone on to have a very successful career. And I think people would be interested to learn more about somebody like that. So chime in. You may have names that I'm not thinking of, maybe even some lesser known ones that you think people might want to hear about. So chime in and let me know what you might want to see on Dark Side of the Ring.